The Amaranthan Museum of Fine Arts stood like a cathedral of color and silence in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina. Its towering arched windows filtered golden afternoon light into streams that danced across polished marble floors. The echoes of careful footsteps and hushed admiration whispered through the great halls like ghosts of painters past. Solas Dane Whitmore was a tall, quietly charming man with eyes the color of old oak and the slow grace of someone who preferred books to parties. At 37, he was a successful art restoration consultant with an impressive eye for detail and a soft spot for forgotten frescoes. That Sunday, he had decided to take his wife, Maribel, to the museum he adored since childhood. Maribel Whitmore, née Virelli, was 35, a stunning woman of Cuban-American heritage with high cheekbones, a dancer's poise, and a mind sharp as broken glass. A photographer by profession, she had the habit of seeing the world in frames and angles. She wore a wine-colored dress that clung to her hips and brought out the dusky amber in her eyes. They had been married for 8 years. They walked hand in hand through the Baroque gallery, admiring opulent canvases laced with myth and madness. Solas smiled, pointing at a Caravaggio replica. "Look at the chiaroscuro, Mar, how the shadows almost swallow the light." Maribel leaned in, angling her phone for a shot. Gorgeous. But I'm obsessed with that Borgia piece behind you. It's got teeth." She snapped photos from 3 different angles, biting her lip in concentration. Solas laughed softly and moved toward the adjacent Impressionist room. "I'm gonna go see the Lemaitre collection," he said. "Wanna come?" Maribel hesitated, then shook her head. "You go ahead, love. I want to stay here just a bit longer, get a few more shots for my gallery blog. I'll catch up." Solas nodded. He kissed her forehead gently and walked away, unaware that the next 40 minutes would change everything. He lost himself in the strokes of Andriel Lemaitre's dreamlike cityscapes, canvases that melted lines between time and memory. But as the half-hour mark passed, a small prick of curiosity needled at his chest. Then came the 40-minute mark. Still no Maribel. He pulled out his phone and sent a casual text. "Still stalking Caravaggio? Miss you already, smiley face." No reply. A minute passed. Then 5. Then 10. He looked around. The room was nearly empty. A security guard stood stiff near the far door, indifferent. Solas turned and made his way back toward the Baroque gallery. As he stepped inside, a strange stillness greeted him. The Borgia painting Maribel had loved still hung in its blood-red glory, but she was nowhere to be seen. He looked behind columns, peeked into corners. Nothing. He checked the time. Almost an hour. An eerie whisper of unease crept into his stomach. He checked her location. Location not available. That was odd. She never disabled her location. His pulse quickened slightly as he began scanning nearby galleries, Classical, Sculpture Hall, the East Atrium. He even asked a docent with silver-rimmed glasses if she had seen a woman in a burgundy dress with a camera. The docent shook her head. "Sorry, sir. I don't recall anyone like that recently. Maybe she's in the rooftop cafe." Solas nodded. "Thanks. I'll check." He climbed the glass staircase to the rooftop cafe. The scent of coffee, rosemary, and baked figs filled the air. The cafe bustled, but Maribel wasn't there. He tried calling. Straight to voicemail. His heart skipped a beat. He was pacing now. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed a slim, suited man in black walking through a restricted door beneath a golden plaque labeled, "Private Collection, Staff Only." The man was laughing. Not loudly, but enough. And he was not alone. He was holding hands with someone. A woman in burgundy. Time slowed. Solas moved toward the door instinctively, but a red velvet rope blocked the entrance. "Staff only, no admittance," read a sign, coldly. He waited until the guard turned away and slipped behind the rope. He pressed his ear against the old mahogany door, breath shallow. Laughter. And then, a voice. Low. Sultry. Familiar. Maribel's. You know I don't have much time, Hector. Solas's mouth went dry. I told him I'd just be taking photos a little longer. He's probably still buried in some abstract mess downstairs. A pause. Then a rustle. Another voice. Male. Confident. Let him stare at paint, March. You deserve to be admired like one. A kiss. Audible. A gasp. Then the unmistakable rhythm of bodies moving too close for decency. Solas staggered back a step. His knees nearly gave out. His stomach churned, and his breath came in shallow waves. He gripped the velvet rope, knuckles white. Who the hell was Hector? Why was his wife with someone in the private collection area? Why was she kissing him? Whispering to him? A museum. Was the last place he thought he'd find betrayal. But there it was, in brushstrokes and shadows. He walked away from the door before the tears could come. But his mind was already calculating, like clockwork. Who was the man? How did they meet? Was this a first betrayal, or just the first time he noticed? And perhaps the most bitter question of all. Was it even about love? Or was this about something much, much darker? Solas walked away from the forbidden door like a man descending from a cliff edge. The world blurred at the edges. Sounds felt muffled, colors too bright. He descended the stairs on autopilot, heart pounding in his throat. As he reached the marble lobby, the weight of what he had overheard settled on him like lead. His wife. With another man. In a museum. While he had been marveling at brushwork, she had been wrapped around someone else, someone named Hector. And what was worse, she had planned it. Told him to go ahead while she stayed behind. With intention. With ease. It wasn't an accident. It was choreography. He sat on a museum bench near a sculpture of Persephone rising from the underworld, her stone eyes frozen in shocked eternity. He stared blankly at the floor, the museum's polished tiles reflecting a distorted version of himself. After 5 minutes, he opened his phone and began digging. Maribel was active on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Threads, even Flickr. Her photography business, Amber Velvet Media, was her pride. She documented weddings, surreal street portraits, and had even done editorial work for indie magazines. But Solas knew her work well. He had proofread her captions, helped organize her archives. He knew every assistant she worked with. But this, Hector. That name didn't ring any bells. He opened her Instagram stories, nothing posted recently. But there was a new follower she had added just 2 weeks ago. At Gallery Spectre. Solas clicked. The account was private, but the bio read. Curator. Collector. Chaos. Charleston and NYC. DMs open if your soul bleeds in pigment. Creepy. Pretentious. And familiar. He scrolled Maribel's tagged photos. One popped out, a moody photo of her sipping espresso in a shadowy loft space. She looked ethereal. Dangerous. The tagged location. Spectre Studios, Charleston branch. His stomach flipped. Spectre Studios wasn't on any map. He searched Google. Nothing. But on Yelp, in a discussion forum, buried in a thread about underground art spaces, one user mentioned a semi-legal gallery on the edge of the Charleston Industrial District, a place known for controversial exhibits, forbidden pieces, and a curator named Hector S. The same Hector. Solas's hands trembled as he bookmarked the thread and stood from the bench. Then, her voice. Solas. He turned. Maribel stood at the edge of the hallway, adjusting her dress, breath a little too shallow, cheeks too flushed. There you are, she said with an easy smile. Sorry, lost track of time. I got caught up shooting that Baroque lighting. You have got to see how the shadows looked in macro. Wanna grab a pastry at the cafe? He stared at her. Studied her. Every detail. She didn't look guilty. That was the most terrifying part. She wasn't nervous or awkward. She was performing. Like nothing had happened. Like her lips hadn't just been wrapped around another man's name. He forced a smile. Yeah. Let's get some coffee. She kissed his cheek and looped her arm through his. You okay? You look pale. Solas nodded. Just a little hungry. That night, after they returned home to their mid-century bungalow in West Ashley, Solas pretended everything was fine. He made dinner, gnocchi with sage and butter, poured her wine, laughed at her stories about a difficult client who wanted all her wedding shots to look like ghosts in the mist. But beneath it all, his mind worked like a forensic lab. That night, as she slept beside him, curled on her side like she always did, Solas stared at the ceiling. The silence screamed. He rose at 2:14 a.m. and walked into his office. He opened his laptop and launched a VPN. Then he began searching more deeply, threads, obscure message boards, art gossip forums. Eventually, he found him. Hector Salazar. Curator. Known in controversial circles as the Art Phantom. Unregistered galleries in 3 states. One rumored in Manhattan. Another in Houston. But his Charleston location, Spectre Studios, was an enigma. More rumors followed. Erotic exhibitions. Stolen art displayed off-record. Models doubling as muses for private viewings. A scandal in 2021 involving a married socialite and a lost painting that was traded under suspicious terms. Solas leaned back in his chair, breath caught. Maribel had been seeing this man. The man who ran a secret gallery. A man who curated experiences, not just paintings. But the worst part wasn't the affair. It was the realization that Maribel wasn't some victim. She was a participant. Willingly walking into the dark underworld of elite underground art circles. And perhaps she was trading more than just her time. The next morning, Solas played along. He kissed her goodbye. He let her think everything was normal. But after she left for a studio shoot, he followed. She didn't drive toward the client's address she had mentioned the night before. Instead, she veered toward the industrial district, toward the warehouse row at the edge of Shipyard Creek. Solas kept his distance, driving a block behind. She pulled into a narrow alleyway behind a building with no name, no address, no signage. Just a red steel door and a painted symbol, a black crown dripping crimson. She disappeared inside. Solas parked. Waited. Watched. And then, someone else exited the side door. A tall man. Black trench coat. Shoulder-length jet hair. And eyes that glinted like knives. Hector. He looked directly at Solas's car. Smiled. And raised a glass of something red in a mock toast. Then turned and vanished inside. The red steel door loomed before Solas like a portal into another world, one smeared in oil paint, secrets, and sweat. The building had no number, no nameplate, just that ominous black crown with a single red drip. It almost looked alive in the morning sun. He stayed in his car for another 10 minutes, watching, processing. Trying to decide if he had it in him to go through with this. To face whatever darkness awaited him inside. But the image of Hector, the smug toast, the knowing stare, lit something primal in him. Not jealousy. Not even rage. Something deeper. Disbelief curdled into conviction. He got out of the car. The alley smelled like rust and citrus peel. An old air conditioner dripped steadily overhead as he approached the door. No buzzer. No camera. Just a small brass knocker shaped like an artist's hand holding a brush. He rapped 3 times. No answer. Then the door clicked open. Inside, darkness and velvet. The hallway was narrow, the walls painted matte black, lined with thin red LED strips running along the baseboards. It smelled of clove smoke and varnish. Each step he took was muffled by thick carpeting beneath his feet. And then, voices. Soft. Laughter. A man's voice murmuring something in French. A woman giggling. Was that Maribel? He walked toward the sound. The corridor opened into a gallery space unlike anything he'd ever seen. Unlike anything Charleston had ever known. The walls glowed. Some paintings had motion sensors, triggering dim spotlights as he passed. Sculptures twisted midair, suspended on near-invisible cables, rotating ever so slightly like they'd taken a breath. A music track, faint, low, pulsing, played from somewhere unseen. Then he saw her. Maribel. But she wasn't just there. She was part of it. She stood in the center of a raised circular platform, barefoot, wearing an open-back gown of sheer crimson fabric that looked like it had been dipped in wine. Around her neck was a choker made of tiny golden picture frames, each holding miniature photos, close-ups of her skin, her eyes, her lips. Behind her stood Hector. He wasn't touching her. But he didn't need to. His presence wrapped around her like gravity. And worst of all, she looked radiant. Confident. Wild. Free in a way Solas had never seen before. She turned slowly. Their eyes met. Her expression flickered, shock, yes, but it was followed not by guilt. But by irritation. She descended the platform like a goddess coming down to lecture a mortal. Solas, she said, voice flat. You shouldn't be here. He couldn't speak. Hector watched, arms folded behind his back, as if this was a performance he had orchestrated. Solas finally choked out the words, "What the hell is this?" Maribel walked up to him, close enough for him to smell the incense on her skin. I told you I needed space, she said quietly. You didn't listen. I thought you meant space to work. To shoot. Not, he gestured at the gallery, at Hector, at her exposed back and glittering choker, whatever this is. This is my work, she said, calm as glass. This is who I am now. He stared at her, heart cracking like old wood. You're cheating on me. No, she said. I'm awakening. A door behind Hector opened, and 2 women walked in. One held a tray of drinks. The other had a camera rig slung across her chest. They didn't even glance at Solas, as though this kind of confrontation was routine here. Hector finally spoke. His voice was smooth, deliberate. Solas, yes. Maribel spoke of you. The husband with the safe hands. The insult was quiet, surgical. I don't know what you think you're doing, Solas said, stepping forward. But she's married. This show you've made her into, it's a violation. Maribel laughed under her breath. You still think I'm some fragile thing to protect? You asked me to marry you, he said, his voice catching. You chose me. She looked at him, and for the first time, she seemed sad. I chose who I thought I wanted to be, she whispered. But I'm not her anymore. Hector walked around the room, gesturing toward various exhibits. Every piece in this gallery has one thing in common, Mr. Wren. They were once hidden. Shamed. Repressed. We liberate them here. We frame the unframeable. And what, Maribel, is your next masterpiece? No, Hector said, approaching her. She's my collaborator. Solas stepped forward again, his chest tight. You're ruining her. Maribel's eyes sharpened. No. You were. She turned and walked away, disappearing into a beaded curtain that led to another room. Hector stood silently for a moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out something unexpected, a small, wrapped canvas. He handed it to Solas. "I suggest you take this," he said. "She painted it last week. Said it was her farewell." Solas took it, stunned, as Hector walked away. The room dimmed again, the red LEDs flickering softly like dying embers. Back in his car, hands shaking, Solas unwrapped the canvas. The painting showed a woman in a crimson dress standing at the edge of a burning forest. Behind her, a man with no face, holding a bouquet of bones. The woman wasn't looking back. She was walking straight into the fire. The drive home was a blur. Charleston streets bled past the windows like a series of smudged brushstrokes, gray, red, blue, a watercolor dream he couldn't wake up from. Solas didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't even curse. There was only silence inside him, the kind that follows after the sirens have faded and the smoke is just beginning to settle. But it wasn't peace. It was something else entirely, a hollow calm, dangerous in its stillness. He placed the painting, her farewell, face down in the back seat. It felt like betrayal had a texture now. Rough canvas. Oily scent. Blood-red hues. When he got home, the house felt foreign. Cold, even in the late summer humidity. Maribel's shoes were still by the door. Her favorite mug, the one with "Chaos is a Ladder," printed in metallic gold, sat in the sink. A few strands of her hair were caught in a brush in the bathroom. The traces of her were everywhere, yet her presence was nowhere. Solas didn't sleep that night. Instead, he poured whiskey and stared at her Instagram page. The gallery hadn't been posted, of course. Not that part. But her other shots, portraits of herself in mirrors, close-ups of textured walls, cryptic captions like, "Becoming unrecognizable is a form of power," were suddenly menacing. He scrolled deeper. Her followers had doubled in the past month. Hector was tagged in several moody black and white shots. One of them, just a silhouette of two hands barely touching, had the caption, "Conscious collision." By morning, Solas made a decision. He went back to the museum. It was closed. Of course it was. Monday. But he didn't come for the exhibits. He asked the security guard at the back entrance, an older man with a patch over one eye and a badge that read, "Kenneth," if he remembered seeing Hector or Maribel the day of the visit. Kenneth raised an eyebrow. "You the guy from Saturday?" Solas nodded. The old man sighed. "Yeah, she was with the tall one. Slick coat. French shoes. They went through Hall C, then disappeared into the south stairwell. No public access down there. Basement?" Solas asked, pulse rising. "Sorta. Old archive storage. Off limits. Full of paintings and weird stuff. Not even staff goes in without clearance." Solas leaned in. "How do I get down there?" Kenneth looked him up and down. "You didn't hear this from me, but the freight elevator's been busted for weeks. You can get down from the west emergency stairwell if you know the code." He scribbled 4 digits on a coffee-stained napkin and walked away without another word. 10 minutes later, Solas was descending into the bowels of the Charleston Museum of Art. The air changed with every step, cooler, heavier, like he was walking into the lungs of something sleeping. At the base of the stairwell, a thick black door sat slightly ajar. Inside, a forgotten world. Hundreds of rolled-up canvases stacked like bodies in linen. Dusty mannequins. Victorian portraiture leaning against cinderblock walls. A taxidermy leopard half-covered in plastic. And a bed. A twin mattress on the floor, covered with paint-stained sheets. Beside it, a tripod. A bowl of half-eaten cherries. A chain of Polaroids hanging from a rusty pipe, all of Maribel. Some tasteful, some feral. Solas's breath caught. He wasn't prepared for this. Not just the proof, but the intimacy of it. This wasn't a fling. It was a life being created without him. Suddenly, voices. Above. Footsteps echoing down the metal stairs. Panic surged through Solas's veins. He ducked behind a row of sculptures, heart thundering in his ears. Then they appeared. Hector and Maribel. She was laughing, barefoot, wearing a man's shirt, not his. Her hair was tied in a loose knot, her neck marked with the faint trace of teeth. "I brought the wrong lens again," she groaned. "Everything's too wide." "Then maybe it's time to open yourself wider," Hector murmured, pulling her close. Solas's fists clenched. Every part of him screamed to lunge, to scream, to end this now. But he didn't. He lifted his phone. Snapped a photo. Then another. And another. If she wanted to be framed, he'd give her a masterpiece. That night, he posted the photo of her from the museum's archive to a dummy Instagram account with the caption, "The things we hide underground often rot in the dark." The account followed just one person. Maribel. She saw it. He knew because the next morning, she was standing at the foot of their bed, pale, trembling, holding the painting he had left face down in the car. "You went there," she said, voice trembling. "You painted it," he replied. She opened her mouth. Closed it again. "I didn't expect you to understand," she whispered. "Oh," Solas said, standing slowly, "I understand perfectly." He picked up the photo he had printed out, the one from the basement, and held it up. "This is what you left me for." She flinched. "It wasn't about leaving you," she whispered. "It was about finding me." He nodded. "Then I hope you like who you found." 2 days passed. Maribel moved into an Airbnb loft in the East End, the artsy part of Charleston where the streets smelled like roasted espresso and paint thinner. Solas didn't ask for details. She offered them anyway. "I need space," she'd texted. He didn't reply. But space is a cruel teacher. And silence, a precise scalpel. Solas poured himself into his work. He photographed a jazz band in Savannah, then a local protest, then a wedding he never wanted to attend. But his lens started changing. Everything became more abstract, more shadow than substance. One photo he took of a grieving widow at a military funeral ended up on the cover of a small local magazine. They titled it "Elegy in Sepia." It was haunting. Raw. Solas didn't even remember taking it. He became obsessed with the museum's basement. He went back twice. Not to confront Hector or Maribel, they were ghosts now, but to understand. To study the place like a crime scene. Every painting they'd hung. Every whisper left in the sheets. He felt like a man unraveling a riddle left behind by a disappearing god. Then he found something. Tucked behind a Greco-Roman bust of an armless muse, a sealed envelope. His name written in heavy, deliberate strokes. Solas. Inside, a letter. "I never meant to fracture you. That was never the art. You were always my gallery, my sanctuary. But I'm cracked in ways you can't mend." Hector, he sees the fractures. Paints inside them. It's not just lust. It's decay turned into color. It's rot turned into revelation. You see the world with clarity. He sees it through ruin. I need both. But I can't live between two canvases. I'm sorry I painted over us. Maribel. The rage should have come. It didn't. Instead, Solas found himself numb. Not from forgiveness. Not from acceptance. But from exhaustion. He left the museum that night and walked for hours, ending up at a crumbling pier where an old man fished alone with a radio and a smile. "You look like you lost something important," the man said, not looking up. Solas chuckled bitterly. "More like I found what I shouldn't have." The man nodded, casting his line. "Art's like that. So is love. Sometimes the frame isn't big enough to hold the truth. Weeks passed. Charleston began to cool. Tourists faded. The air smelled of salt and ash. Solas started building an exhibit. His own. He called it the Gallery of Ghosts. It wasn't about Maribel. Not exactly. But she was in every photo. In the negative space. In the lighting. In the motion blur. In the stillness. One wall was dedicated to that basement. He hung up the Polaroids he'd taken. The mattress. The bowl of cherries. The tripod. People whispered at the opening night. Is this real? It's like voyeurism through heartbreak. Who is she? Solas never answered. He just walked the exhibit, suit crisp, eyes shadowed. A ghost among his ghosts. Until he saw her. Standing by the final piece. The painting. Her painting. Maribel. She looked different. Older. Tired. But real. You put it all up, she said softly. He nodded. Everything but the letter. She stared at the canvas. Then at him. Did you hate me? He thought for a long moment. No, he said finally. I grieved you. And she wept. Not because he was cruel. But because he was honest. Later that night, she left. Not just the gallery. Charleston. She moved to Chicago. Solas heard from a friend that she opened a niche gallery there. Abstract. Raw. Unapologetically brutal. Hector didn't go with her. She left him too. Charleston's winter had a way of tasting like wood smoke and unfinished poems. Solas found his rhythm in the silence. The gallery exhibit, the Gallery of Ghosts, toured cities up the East Coast, Raleigh, then Baltimore, and finally New York. It wasn't fame he sought. It was exorcism. He documented the aftermath. Grief in motion. Betrayal not as an act, but as a ripple. A consequence. A question. Then he vanished from the public eye. He bought a small fixer-upper house just outside of Asheville. A frame cottage with ivy-covered windows and an attic that let in just the right kind of melancholy light. He painted again. Not photographs. Not collages. Brush and oil. Color and canvas. He painted his nightmares. He painted the curve of a shoulder turning away. He painted the ashtray in the basement of the museum. He painted a Polaroid falling. But he also painted hope. A door left ajar. A hand unclenching. A sky returning to blue. One day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a small square painting. Her style. Unmistakable. The background was burnt orange, like a sunset gasping its last breath. In the center, a frame. Empty. Beneath it, one word. Reclaimed. No note. No signature. Solas stared at it for hours. Then he hung it on his studio wall. Not as a trophy. Not as a scar. But as part of the gallery that now lived in him. Months later, a knock came at his door. A woman stood there. Young, maybe early 30s. Nervous. Are you Solas Amber? She asked. He nodded slowly. She smiled. I'm a curator. Chicago Contemporary. Maribel told me to find you. She said, if you were still painting, you'd be ready. Solas looked past her, at the woods bending in the dusk. He stepped aside. Then let's begin again.